Hi, this is Rob Bowron with Sharp College Football, and today we're going to talk some Bulldogs, the Georgia Bulldogs, a team that has been really, really good under Kirby Smart and has an opportunity we project to be really good again in 2020. And there really should be a lot of optimism around this Georgia team. They're really stacked, in particular on one side of the ball coming back, and they have a new offensive coordinator. The title gave it away. They're really stacked on the defensive side of the ball with what they have coming back. But a new offensive coordinator that could help really fix some of the issues that they had last season on offense. Really, I think, for lack of a better way to put it, Georgia's a team that a lot of people should be talking about as a real national title contender coming into this year. I think that they are not being talked about in that way, because they lose their quarterback. And of course, like, if you're going to talk about, the recipe for, preseason projections on people that, do it the old fashioned way is, did they win games at the end of the year, the prior year, and are they bringing back a quarterback? If so, then they must improve. Georgia, we really think, could potentially improve even with losing Jake Fromm, because they have, not only do you have where they really struggled last season, they made the necessary change. There is a new OC in place, and they get somebody with a pretty good track record in Todd Monken. But you also have Jamie Newman coming in at quarterback from Wake Forest. So Georgia's really gonna be stacked next season, and a team that, with a lot of the uncertainty that you do have around them, I think could be really addressed by some of the the changes that they've made. So if you have there's a dark horse national title contender, it's hard to say that, under Kirby Smart, as well as Georgia has done, as well as they have recruited, that in any way Georgia could be considered a dark horse. But in a lot of ways, like, people aren't necessarily, oh shoot, we totally disconnected from the internet. Well, I apologize on the stream. That may have gone really badly. I will try to recapitulate much of what we just covered very quickly. So Georgia brings a lot back on defense. They had an excellent defense last season. The defensive coordinator returns. The offense kind of stunk, went into a ditch. That offensive coordinator's gone. In steps Todd Monken. They bring Jamie Newman in to replace Jake Fromm. There's a lot to potentially be excited about with this Georgia squad. Kirby Smart's really had them rolling since he took over. As we sort of mentioned, they're really a dark horse national title contender. As much as you can really say Georgia's a dark horse at anything these days, because really Georgia's, as well as they recruit, and as well as they performed at a lot of years, it's really, you really should expect them to be near the top of their game. They're projected a little lower coming into this year versus prior seasons, because they really just, they went into a ditch offensively last year. And we'll definitely talk about that. They really fell off, but Kirby Smart has, made his move to try to address that. So they were at number 5 in 2019. In 2018, they were at number 3 overall. The year before that, the year that they lost to Bama in that title game, we actually had Georgia number 1 at the end of the season as the best team in college football. Like, they really have been consistently very, very good under Kirby Smart. So that, I think, speaks to that last year, where they fell out of, the top 1, 2, 3 range in college football, really, speaks to the, where that offense really ended up and how much of a change they really needed to make. They were at number 6 in special teams last year. That really bodes well. If you're going to compete at the top level here, you also have to be very, very good at special teams. They're at 59 in returning production overall. That puts them squarely in the middle. They don't have it is a little tilted. They lose more on the offensive side of the ball than they do on defense. In some ways you could argue, and, statistically speaking, returning production is more correlated with offensive production. So, we will call that out as a little bit of a watch out, that they do have a lot more coming back on defense and less on the offensive side of the ball. That said, new offensive coordinator, we really do expect them to improve off where they finished off last year. They were at number 2 overall in recruiting, just right behind Bama. And there really is, if you look at the average recruiting rankings, don't look at I I don't know. I mean, I think the recruiting services do it because they think they add value with it, with their analysis. They don't. It's actually worse. It's less. So don't look at just, if you ever look at recruiting rankings, disregard the class rankings that 24/7 or Rivals come up with. They're nearly pointless. What you should look at is the average recruiting ranking, just like a true average ranking of the players that they bring in. That's actually more correlated with performance than the class rankings are that they come up with. So like I said, it's tested. Go with the average, because whatever they think they're doing with those class rankings is bad. Or it's not necessarily bad. It's just, I don't know. It's clearly less good than just, taking the average. So, but number 2, and there's a gap. I mean, there's a little bit of a gap between Alabama and Georgia. But Kirby Smart really did learn, the lesson from Nick Saban that you really have to go out and recruit like gangbusters. And so there's a little gap there. And then there's a bit of a bigger gap between Georgia and LSU, and A&M. But, when you recruit this well, you can have a reasonable expectation, and Georgia certainly has, absolutely has the kind of, dollars in their coaching staff there that you can have the reasonable expectation. And I think that you can be in a little bit, replace land, right? Like where you are going to lose some production, but the guy you have stepping up is an all-star recruit who's also had excellent coaching, and you have the potential to really be able to replace without a lot of production, without a lot of fall off year over year. So Georgia's a team to watch, I think, for that reason too. I mean, when you recruit at this level, you are really, setting yourself up to be successful from the get-go. So Kirby Smart, I forgot to set that up. What a doofus. So Kirby Smart, the head coach, Nick Saban protege, really of the Nick Saban proteges, really the one that's been successful. He's not a question mark. The rest of them are sort of like, have Nick Saban proteges been successful? Question mark. So some have. I mean, it gets a little hard when people start to say like coaching tree. I think coaching tree can be a little overrated, but I would say with Smart, he certainly learned some very valuable lessons from his time with Nick Saban, and he has been so far the only one to really build what you could argue is truly an Alabama clone in a lot of ways. So let's get into the offensive numbers, for the Bulldogs here. Audio's good. Those are the defensive numbers. I apologize. This is like mildly set up tonight. It's Friday night. I apologize. As you can see, this offense, number 18 overall in beta rank, that not even in the top 10, not closing in on the top 5, just not where you want to be if you're Georgia. So they're at number 17 in drive efficiency. That really is something they're going to have to clean up coming into the season. They're going to have to be able to put together long drives, controlling for, field position and opponent. Their explosive drives number, again, at 18, that's not great. I mean, they have to be able to put up more big plays than they were able to last season. Their play efficiency number at 39, play efficiency is the least important of the beta rank metrics. However, yikes. I mean, 39 overall. I mean, their yards per play when controlling for opponent and field position, just not great. Negative drives, too many 3 and outs, too many turnovers, at 22. Just they really have their work cut out from here, and they really felt, and we'll get into, because some of these numbers are really kind of surprising, but they, that 27 in effective rush, 36 in effective pass. Those are not national championship caliber type numbers. And really, Georgia, you could really argue last year is almost lucky that they didn't, end up in the playoff, because they would have really, you really did get to see the difference between them and LSU in that game. So they're going to have to, as I said, they're going to have to take a big step forward on offense. Todd Monken comes in as the new offensive coordinator. He was most recently with the Cleveland Browns and had been in pro football. He had been the offensive coordinator at Oklahoma State, and then the head coach at Southern Miss. It really did not work with his time in Southern Miss. But he was, the last time he was a college offensive coordinator, he had, in 2012, he had the number 9 offense in beta rank. My expectation is actually Monken, who seems to have the requisite skill as a play caller, and understanding that I think he has also probably picked up some schematic stuff that's going to work from the pros, that should also work in college. So this should be a step up from where they were. James Coley, the former offensive coordinator, really did not work out in his 1 year at the helm. This offense, they were at number 3 in 18. So, dropping all the way down to 18 overall in 2019 really hurt this team. This team was good enough. If you look at their defense, and it is tough. I mean, they would have had to have really, again, had just an excellent offense, and excellent offenses last year were exceptional. I mean, that LSU offense, the Bama offense before Tua got hurt, the Ohio State offense, and there were some really, really excellent offenses last year. And it's weird to say. I mean, Oklahoma was a very good offense last year, but not even quite in the the range of some of those other teams. Georgia, you might need to be in that range again, this year, because it does feel as, I mean, the trajectory of college offenses right now, we sort of are in the era of big offense. Georgia's going to need to take a real big leap coming into this year. They actually had some pretty solid play overall from Jake Fromm. He was number 8 overall in Pro Football Focus's QB grades last season. That's pretty solid. I don't think Fromm. I think some people take a look at Fromm's numbers and look and say, and the offense itself struggled. So Fromm really did look like he struggled in it. It wasn't all on him. When you actually ended up grading out his throws, he had a lot of good throws, not a lot of bad. I mean, more than anything, he simply didn't have a lot of very bad throws last season. What I struggle with when I see these numbers here and then the grade for Fromm is, the offensive line under, their former offensive line coach, Sam Pittman, who's now the head coach at Arkansas. It was the number 2 graded out offensive line in all of college football last year. I always struggle when I see, an offense that doesn't grade out terribly well, but has an offense it really speaks to some severe dysfunction in scheme and play calling. When you are in a spot where you are, you have a quarterback grading out in the top 10, you have an offensive line grading out in the top 2, you're doing some things very wrong to not be putting up points more regularly if you were Georgia, given what you were working with last year. So Pittman moving on is a bit of a concern. He was such a well-regarded offensive line coach. I do expect Georgia will continue to be good on the line. In steps at quarterback, Jamie Newman from Wake Forest, really, in a lot of ways, the very best player on that Wake Forest squad. He was the number 16 graded quarterback in Pro Football Focus's grades last year. They should not miss a beat at QB, and that in many ways sets them up in a place where you can really feel confident about saying that Georgia should be, in the conversation for for a national title in this year. If Monken really can, their uncertainty really is more around Monken being able to get it going. Alabama, if to flip their uncertainties, they're not bringing in a Jamie Newman, right? They certainly have some Georgia also has some really highly recruited guys on their roster, but they're not bringing in a Jamie Newman with experience. Bama's question is going to be replacing Tua more. Georgia has that a little more answered, I would argue, but certainly Bama has the offensive coordinator a little more answered than that they have a guy in place, that they don't have to break in Sarkisian, who just up until, the injury last year, but has done really well, not his injury, Tua's injury. But the Alabama offense was just rolling. And he's done a phenomenal job resurrecting his career, as many have under Nick Saban. It is, this offense sits at 99 in returning production. That's a solid number, in some ways, because it puts them at, let me pull up the exact percentage, because it's, when you look at it, the rankings, they tend to be quite bunched. So that puts them at exactly 50% of their production returning. So even though you think 99, they must be around 30% of their production returning. It's actually half of the production returns off of last year's squad, on offense. So it's not a total rebuild. I mean, clearly not having Fromm hurts. They're going to lose some pieces on the offensive line, the other skill positions, but they're also bringing enough back to give you some confidence that what they'll be able to bring in off of their excellent recruiting with some very good coaching and hopefully some improved scheme and play calling from Monken, that this offense really could take a step forward and put them in a position to be in contention for the playoff, particularly if the playoff is only picking from the SEC, ACC, and Big 12. They could potentially, it does make the likelihood of two SEC teams making the playoff somewhat high, I would argue. So on the defensive side of the ball, did we show the Todd Monken picture? We did. I'm on it. Sort of. So, man, this defense was good last season. This is what is just so much of a, in some ways, Georgia really should have been set up for, content. I don't know that anyone catches where LSU got to last year, but Georgia really should have been set up to try. And it's only because the offense really fell off that we ended up, there, because man, this defense last year was nasty. They were so good. So number 2 overall in beta rank behind Clemson. They were number 16 in drive efficiency. That's good. If you're going to nitpick about what you could do against this Georgia defense, is compared to their other numbers, they were somewhat susceptible to giving up long drives. So you could comparatively find ways to drive the length of the field to put up points against this Georgia team. What they absolutely did not let you do, however, was put up big plays. Number 1 in play efficiency too. They really controlled your yards per play. I mean, they made you this defense. Yeah, you could maybe put up some, longer drives against them, but they absolutely made you earn it. They certainly, in number 2 in negative drives, they were excellent at forcing 3 and outs, forcing turnovers. The number 2 in effective rush, really controlled the run game. You could argue maybe a little bit of room to improve against the pass, but it's hard to find a lot to nitpick around when it's the number, they were the number 2, defense in beta rank last season. It was the first year calling plays for Danny Lanning, and he did, and along with, I'm forgetting his name, Andy Avalos at Oregon, just did a phenomenal job. They're, in their first years and their respective jobs. Danny Lanning just, could have been up for, if not for Joe Brady, up for, the coordinator, assistant of the year, the Broyles Award, last year. And if he continues like this, he will certainly be in Broyles Award type conversations. They were the number 8 defense in 18, in Mel Tucker's last year. So they actually managed to replace their defensive coordinator and fully improve. They are they're at number 21 in returning production on this side of the ball. We have this projected as the number 1 defense in beta rank next season. So all kinds of reasons to be super excited about what this defense could do. And it's part of why we sort of I'm talking about this Georgia squad as a potential national title contender. Because if you can fix the offense, and we think Monken will be an improvement, then the defense should be set in a lot of ways. So this should be a really fun defense to watch, I think, coming into the next year. Maybe other people won't find that. Maybe if you have to play Georgia, it won't be that much fun if you're a fan of another team. But this should be a really, really good defense to get after people again coming into next season. So let's take a look at the schedule. This is always fun when we get to the schedules at this point for who may actually be playing whom. So the schedule that was, Georgia would have been projected at 9.53 wins overall, and just under 6 in conference. They have some tough games on the schedule here. I think that, and that's part of what's, pushing their number down. I still think, however, that you would look at this Georgia squad as, it has an opportunity to beat this projection and maybe, depending on how that Alabama game went, really make a run at, an undefeated year. So, there's not any, non-conference games that you're all that disappointed about not seeing. I mean, Virginia's going to take a step back this season with all they lost. Louisiana, Monroe, is going to be bad. Georgia's going to be favored by a bunch in that game. And Georgia Tech, still in the, post Paul Johnson rudder correction phase. So the schedule that is, however, is a little different. I mean, and they did get some, not necessarily luck, I guess you could say, but well, yeah, I mean, a little bit of luck in that they already had Alabama on the schedule. So then what they managed to add was actually pretty good in adding additional West teams. They got Arkansas and Mississippi State. So it could have been a lot worse. You could have drawn, LSU, or A&M in that mix, but you already, of course, have, the game, the crossover game against Auburn on the schedule. And this was your year to play Bama in the regular season. It's, it is a little bit, it's kind of nice to not have to get, though, to, miss the other potentially really good teams in the SEC West on the draw. So they should be, the Arkansas game is one that's not here, that wasn't on the schedule. We have Georgia with a 95% win probability in that game, just under a 21-point favorite. The Auburn game, that we project Georgia as a favorite, about a 63% win probability, about 3.5 points as the favorite there. That will be an interesting game to see. That game, I think, for Auburn in particular, they'll be coming off of playing what we believe will be a tough Kentucky team with Wilson coming back off of injury. That could be a really important game. That could feel like a very important game for Auburn if they slip up against Kentucky. And it could be a game too that for the Tigers anyway, that it will feel like a referendum on where they are offensively, and if they have taken enough of a step forward to compete with a defense like Georgia. The Auburn defense will be interesting to see. They were excellent last season as well. And so it will be interesting to see for this Georgia team. I don't necessarily expect Auburn. They lose a considerable amount off of their defense. We still project them into the top 10. This will be a good test for Georgia's offense, though, to see where they're at under Monken. Then they get Tennessee. Georgia, we project them at about a 14-point favorite over Tennessee. I think that's still true. Pruitt seems to have done a decent job recruiting. He has yet to turn that into on the field results, and we don't expect that to necessarily change in a big way this season. Then comes the real showdown here, Alabama. That game, right now we have it projected, and some of this is that we are likely under projecting the Georgia offense because we don't take into account that Monken is now the offensive coordinator. I might have this as Alabama by about 8. We really do project Alabama to be excellent next year, but it could be closer if this Georgia offense really can outperform and get into the range of being an excellent offense. Then all bets are off. And this game, by the time it rolls around, if Georgia really sticks it to Auburn in particular, then this game could be as close as 4 points. So then we get Kentucky. This game, we project this to be about a touchdown. Kentucky could be better. Georgia could also be better. I think a touchdown feels about right. And with about a 74% win probability for Georgia. Kentucky just hasn't recruited into the range that Georgia has. That said, Georgia better bring their A game, because Kentucky is close enough that if Georgia, turns it over more than once or really plays poorly, and doesn't finish off drives, Kentucky could absolutely beat you. And then you get the Florida Gators. They're, a team that I think we're a little less high on. Some people sort of had projected them as their sort of dark horse playoff team. I still like Georgia a lot in the East. And you can take all of your, Kyle Trask is returning, therefore Florida will radically improve takes. I want none of those. I will take Georgia's defense on it and see and roll the dice with where we end up with Monken. But Georgia is about a 4.22 point favorite in that game. 65% win probability. I would actually probably put that closer to a touchdown. I think Georgia's going to be better. I think we have Florida about right. I think Georgia might beat their projection. For Missouri here, really Georgia, they're going to be a big favorite over the Tigers. We've talked about this a little bit, that Drinkwitz, we don't expect him to have the immediate, impact that Satterfield had on that Louisville offense. I think Missouri's gonna. It's not as easy as a playing field in the SEC versus the ACC. So I think that Missouri squad, there's going to be a little bit of a rebuild there. Mississippi State, this is one of the ones they added on. We have Georgia with an 84% win probability in this game, about 14.5 points, a favorite there. Again, as we've talked about, the Georgia defense might be champing at the bit to get after KJ Costello if they can in that game. And it really is. Once you get past that Florida game, the schedule really eases up. So if they only have one loss up to that point, say it's a close loss to Bama, Georgia, particularly if they are blowing people out of the water, and Bama were to stumble at any point along the way, like Georgia's going to be pretty well set up, provided that they can, if there is an SEC championship game that, they win that. But South Carolina, Georgia will be a big favorite in this game. We have it at nearly 16 points and 88% win probability. That Gamecocks offense really has to clean things up coming into this year. Vanderbilt, I'm an alum, but it's not going to be a close game. It's that is a 99% win probability for Georgia, and just under 28 points, 27.22 points. There. That is that's going to be a very tough game between the hedges for the Commodores. Not a pleasant game, I would expect. So, when we think about wrapping up Georgia, and let me make sure that the audio is still functioning. I'm sorry for the wait here. Yeah, it's still good. Hooray, huzzah. Anyway, so we're excited. I really am just excited to see this Georgia squad this next year. I think that they, made a solid move with hiring Monken in. I think Kirby Smart really does see where things are going, that he has to be able to produce a top-notch offense. And going with Monken is a little bit of a different, place than they had been in. They had been in a power run, not in the sense of running the power, but Georgia has a zone running scheme, but had really been in a run first offense in a lot of ways. For them to bring in Monken, I think, is a realization by Smart of really where things are going offensively in college football, and that Georgia's going to really need to develop the passing game a bit more. That's a sharp assessment by Smart, and he didn't sit around saying like, I have this great defense and that's just what we're going to do. He went out and made the hire to try to, really refactor the offense after a year where things didn't quite work out. And you absolutely, I should say this, you can run the ball and win in college football and put up a lot of points. Like, that is possible, Georgia they didn't do that last year. And, and in particular with what they have, talent wise, like you might as well try to be as diverse and interesting as possible and lean into your strength. And Georgia certainly has some athletes at wide receiver, and they've recruited really well at quarterback. So they should also be able to and look to take advantage of that as well. So I think what to look for Georgia to beat this number 6 projection that we have for them. The big thing is how's the offense working, for this Georgia squad. We have the defense projected at number 1. We have some faith in how good this defense is going to be. What is going to be interesting is what does this offense look like under Monken, right? Does it look like a lot more like the pro style sets he was obviously running in the pros? Or, not that the pros aren't also running a lot of the same concepts as you see in college these days. They absolutely are. Or, is it, some of the very wide open stuff he was running at, like last time he was in college? My expectation is that it'll probably lean a little bit to more of what he was doing with the pros. Georgia certainly has the personnel to do that. At Oklahoma State, he didn't always have that kind of personnel. And certainly at Southern Miss, he did not, where you can put in the kind of, matchup, nightmares that you have at tight end. Really, it very often comes down as to, can you recruit freak athletes at tight end that might change up how your set looks versus like how you might run like the air raid. I mean, not that Monken runs the air raid, but like how you might run a pass heavy, scheme somewhere else where, your trade-off in putting that fourth wide receiver on the field versus a tight end is pretty easy because your fourth wide receiver is a lot better than your very best tight end. At Georgia, he's going to have, a lot of weapons at his disposal. But I would also say that, Lincoln Riley really does run the air raid. He often has a tight end on the field. The tight end runs the route. Monken, I think you're going to see, some pretty interesting concepts is my expectation from what we've seen from him in the pros and what he really also, he was really one of the best in the game at executing when he was at Oklahoma State. So I'm excited to see this. If this offense is able to make a click, if they're able to improve on where they were throwing the ball in particular, as well as getting back to what Georgia, really can do running the football, I think that this team could really, exceed where they were by a long shot. What could really make this defense dangerous is, keep an eye on where they're grading out in their pass defense. If they're able to improve on that and also hold a little bit where they were on their run defense, they could be excellent, just excellent next season. So if you're a Georgia fan, I think there's a lot of promise about this team, and there's a very high base, for this team, given where we project the defense and how well they've recruited, all of that. I think that there is a very, very high base for this with the potential to really make a run at something this year. So I would be really excited. There's also, I can't remember if and I forgot to check it before we did this video. So, if you see it or know it, put it in the comments that, whether JT Daniels was eligible. I think he was eligible this season. I don't expect, I fully expect Newman to beat out Daniels, but Daniels is a very interesting project. I would like project to continue to develop down the road. He still has a world of talent. Even though he ended up being beat out by Slovis, injured, and then, he was not going to win the job back from Slovis. But I do think that Daniels is a really interesting guy to have there, that if he is eligible and can play, then, behind Newman, you certainly also have a guy with some starting experience, albeit most of that offensive experience that he had in his 1 year starting at USC was bad. I don't think as much of it was on him as on the offensive play calling. So get excited about this Georgia squad. I think, if you're looking for another team to potentially, give, if you're one of those, I want to give Alabama some comeuppance. Georgia's, really probably your best bet this season in the SEC in a lot of ways. Unless somebody else just pulls an LSU, and not that LSU came out of nowhere last year. We had them projected, I believe, at number 7, but they, we didn't have them projected at number 1. Let's put it that way. This should be a fun squad. So we're going to keep rolling into this next week. We are going to be in the top 5. How outstanding is that? So we'll be covering Oklahoma next. When we reconvene on Monday, we'll be doing the Sooners. Really excited to talk about, everything Lincoln Riley's got going on. Alex Grinch, we expect to continue to develop that Oklahoma defense. And if they really do on defense, in the way that Georgia sort of needs to correct what they did on offense last year. I don't know. Oklahoma's a little interesting. They were very, very good on offense last year. They weren't great. They really, in some ways, do need to be great to make up for where they've been with their deficiencies on the defensive side of the ball. I think if Grinch can make up for some of that, then and Riley can get back to being, one of the very best offenses in all of college football, and he had a year stretch where he was at number 1. I think this Oklahoma team might be pretty interesting as well, because they've certainly recruited well enough that Grinch has, some raw material to work with. Anyway, that'll be Monday. So thank you so much for tuning in. Let's do some credentials, as I call them, the creds. You find all the stats you just saw and a whole lot more at sharpcollegefootball.com. They're all organized in Google Data Studio. You can shuffle through, you can print off PDFs of your team. You can email them to your friends, other fans, people you don't like that you want to brag that your team is going to beat theirs. All of that is available there. I'm Rob Bowron. I'm the econometrician, economechicken behind BetaRank. I also handle the tweets from at Sharp College Football, and we have a Pac-12 podcast at 12 Pack Radio. You can find all the back episodes of that podcast at sharpcollegefootball.com/12packradio. Again, thank you so much for tuning in. We will see you on Monday. Stay safe out there.